Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest on for the first time, Kasey Orvidas. Hopefully I said that. Said
You
I would
got
do it. Okay, good.
it.
Funny story. So I do this beforehand, like just to make sure that I get everyone's names, and I'll like say it right beforehand, and then once I hit record, it's for whatever reason, it's just like a different ball game. Then it's everything's out the window. You don't know what's gonna come out. Cool. Got the last name right. Real quick, if you aren't familiar with Kasey, she holds a PhD in psychology and is a certified health and fitness coach. She has spent a big chunk of her life developing some serious expertise in mindset and health behavior change. And she's racked up numerous publications in a variety of peer reviewed scientific journals. So that's awesome. Not only are you a coach now, but you also have the experience of some of the research as well, too. So I know again, appreciate you coming on today, Kasey. Looking forward to chatting with you. Real quick, what I typically like to do with a new guest is just your background. Like, how did you get where you're at today? And then, yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, perfect. This question is always hard for me because I'm like,
I
how
know.
far back do these people really want to hear about my life? So today, everything I do is a mixture of fitness and psychology. And that's like at a very baseline level, that's what I do. And scrolling back the years, where that sort of started was really in college. I really started to fall in love with health and fitness, nutrition, strength training mainly for myself, and got to see not only how that helped me from like a body composition standpoint, but also just other aspects of my life, other areas of my life, how it really bled into like confidence, determination, and in every other aspect of my life. And I really started to think to myself, why is it so hard for people to stick to this stuff? Like, why am I finding so much love and joy and interest and benefit from these things? And so many people struggle to even stick with healthy eating, getting to the gym consistently, etc. I was getting a degree in psychology at the time, but my focus was mainly on forensic psychology. I actually wanted to be a prison warden, fun fact. So that was where a lot of my love for research really started, was doing a lot of research on children of incarcerated parents. So some of my first work was ever done in the jail system, which is interesting and quite different from where I ended
Yeah.
up. But so I fell in love, and I was falling in love with health and fitness for myself. And when it came time to figure out, okay, where's the big girl job going to come into play here? What are we going to do after we get this degree? I really started to play with the idea that this health and fitness stuff is something that I was really becoming a passion of mine. So how could I potentially blend this? And then it led me into, maybe I can start to answer this question as to why are more people not doing this? Because clearly it's not a knowledge issue. People understand that they need to eat healthy, they need to work out, they need to take care of themselves. That's not what's keeping them from doing it, right? I found a couple different programs across the nation, different PhD programs, some master's programs, just looking at higher level education to really hone in my expertise in these two areas, but together. And I came across the Mindset Lab at NC State. I had never heard of mindset science before. At that time, people were not obsessed with mindset like they are, which is it's great. But you did not see people who said that you did, but it just was not as popularized, not as many mindset coaches that are fitness coaches, that sort of thing, mindset programs. So this was all very new to me. So I was introduced to this area of mindset, and Dr. Jennifer, who became my PhD advisor, was doing work on mindset in a variety of areas. But the area that was most interesting to me was that she was focusing also on health behaviors and obesity. So I spent a little bit more time learning about that. I flew out to North Carolina, did the whole arduous interview process there. Really loved Raleigh. Really loved Dr. Jenny Burnett. And very quickly was like, okay, I see where we could potentially take this research and I could really focus on the health and fitness wing of mindset. Sure, let's maybe do that. Long story short, got my PhD there, spent nearly 5 years researching growth versus fixed mindset and how it plays a role in our health behaviors. How can we exercise? How healthy we eat? That sort of thing. At the same time, also started coaching and was nutrition coaching at a local gym in Raleigh, and had some online coaches online as well. So I was doing research and then also taking that into the real world simultaneously, which was a really cool opportunity. And like looking back, I had no idea at the time how great of an opportunity that really was. I was just doing something that I love, coaching, making little money while I was making zero money, getting my PhD in psychology. And then after the PhD, then it really became, okay, now let's talk big girl. What are we going to do with this? I can't just keep going to school at this point. And I got the corporate runaround from a handful of larger companies the fitness space, not to name any names, but my goal was to be on the science team and continue to do behavior change research for some of these larger companies. And I got very frustrated very quickly. I had never worked for anyone else yet at this point, aside from odd jobs here and there, like growing up when I was in high school, college, thing. And I just was getting really frustrated with this. I have to wait for other people to make decisions before I know what's going on with my life. I was still coaching at the time. And so I took a chance on myself and thought, let me see what I can do with this coaching stuff. I'd love to come out with a program for coaches to teach more about psychology. And there isn't really anything like that out there. Nobody's really talking about mindset from an evidence-based perspective, it's woo manifestation world. And so I did. I took a chance, always knew I could fall back on my PhD and see what I could do, become a professor, what have you. And that was in 2019, and it is now 2024. And I have not looked back, and it was the best decision I think I've ever made my entire life. Very happy and very fulfilled with the impact that I've been able to make through both one-on-one coaching. I have a team of coaches that does the fulfillment of the service at this point. We do have a very strong emphasis on mindset and behavior change in those health and fitness coaching practices. And then I also have the health mindset coaching certification, which is my program for health and fitness professionals to really learn the science of mindset and psychology and behavior change and utilize that with their clients without having to get a PhD.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. It sounds like you paved your own way right there with that. And you took advantage of, because I know a lot of certifications, they don't really teach the behavior side. And I think a lot of people overlook that side and they really underestimate the value and the impact of that. Like you said, the mindset, the behavior change, it's always macros, this or training this. And it's, man, it really working with clients, like that side of stuff is just, you don't get as much information and people think it's all that nitty gritty stuff, which I know you had a post, you obviously mentioned that stuff's important, but it's, man, they just overlook these big rocks here with that. So that's awesome. So if you don't mind, what's your health certification look like? And then, let's start there with that. What does that look like? Is it, again, you said it's science-based, stuff like that. I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So we break it down into, is it 3 sections or 4 sections? And essentially what we're doing in the first section is laying the groundwork of the foundations of behavior change science. So what well-validated theories of behavior change already exist that we know have been very long-standing in the research, are supported by tons and tons of studies. And then how do we take those theories that is like very scientific jargony and translate it into health and fitness coaching practices? What does the health belief model mean? What does the trans theoretical model mean for coaching practices? Which again, lots of scientific jargon, but that's not how the course is taught. We're essentially saying, hey, here's this thing, here's what it means, and here's now what it means for you and how you can leverage it as a coach to help your clients achieve lasting changes, stop self-sabotage, etc. So we go through that, and then we move into kind of more of the, I guess you could say, like fun stuff people are really looking forward to: self-control, willpower, motivation, habits, growth versus fixed mindset, all of those kind of big dial movers in the health and fitness coaching space from a psychological perspective. So again, I'm bringing in the science and what the research says about these things, and then giving true, like, applicable tools that coaches can use with their clients. So we go through that in that section. And the final section, it is 3 sections. I'm like, do I even know my own program? The final section, we go into a little bit more of like application heavy stuff. So we're talking about communication strategies that let you know all the science and these specific methods that you can use from a psychological perspective. Now, how do we actually speak to our clients, and how do we take this stuff and actually implement it by words? Like, how are we actually talking to them to help them make those maybe subtle behavior changes and subtle mindset shifts without it being like a direct thing, which is truly, at the end of the day, real mindset coaching is indirect. It's in between the lines. It's how you're doing everything as a coach, not just how you're handing over a PDF about growth versus fixed mindset for them to fill out. We do that. We do a lot more sort of case study practice. Okay, how does this stuff actually look through a client check-in type of lens? People finish a final case study assessment where you're actually like speaking to a client, and we are giving you handwritten feedback through the end. One of my biggest pet peeves with any online courses is that there's not a lot of that like instructor involvement. Yeah. And you have however long you want to complete this lifetime access to this course, and then no involvement from an actual instructor. So even if you were to do it, you don't necessarily know if you're doing right, and you're not actually sure how to apply everything. So we made that a really big part of the program, so that through the very end, you're basically getting your hand held to make sure that you're going out into the world and you know what to do with this information. It wasn't just like a fire hose of content for 12 weeks. Yeah, that's what you're looking at as far as the health mindset. We have lots of CEU opportunities and are partnered with a lot of different organizations that most people have like their CPT or nutrition coach certification through. So you can get CEUs at the same time. Nice. Like that. Yeah, that's
So yeah, no, that's awesome. So it sounds like again, you're explaining the models, and then you're giving the coaches things that they can actually use with their clients. But then on top of that, you're also layering in, hey, how do we actually communicate this to the client? Because that's probably where, again, not only do people want to look for macros, stuff like that. It's probably the same thing with coaches where they want to get more knowledge, but then they also, there's that kind of gap where they're not like communicating well to the person either. And there's probably that mismatch there. What are you working with these people and having this course? What do you find are the most like common challenges from a communication standpoint? Is it just how people deliver it? Is it not communicating? What do you typically see are like the big issues there with that?
Yeah, one of the big is a constant on trying to fix things or immediately provide solutions to clients. And it's a big mistake, not necessarily mistake because people don't really know any different. But it's a big issue because you actually think you're helping with it. And I think this is what's great about all this too, is it's so easy to translate to other relationships, whether it's romantic relationships, parenting, coworkers, your boss, whatever. In any of these circumstances, if you have someone who's struggling with something or trying to decide what direction to go or having a hard time sticking to something, what you want to do is, especially as a coach, right, is immediately go to that person and say, oh, here's what I think you should do.
Yep.
Try this, do this. Here's this list of things you could try, or let's try this for next week. And we really do think as coaches, that's what our clients are looking for. And a lot of times they technically are. How many times have you probably heard, I just need someone to tell me what to do? But that's not what's best behavior change in a perspective. What we're doing is really robbing those people of autonomy and independence, and instead creating potentially like needy, I hear that term used a lot amongst the coaching space, needy clients who are just like constantly like dependent on the coach. And my response is, what are you doing as the coach to make the client needy? So instead, what we really should do is spend more time sitting on our hands and instead asking questions. So in situations where a client is struggling, instead of just immediately wanting to give that solution or try to fix it, ask them more questions around like why they think it's happening, what they've tried in the past, what works for them, what doesn't, what solutions maybe they have to present first. There's a lot of different ways to go about that without it coming across as like just putting off the responsibility onto the client, because I think that's what coaches worry about happening too. Oh, they're paying me, I need to give them this. That's not necessarily the case. And you can have a conversation with someone without it coming off as, I don't want to do my job, you do it for me, right? There's different ways to do that. So that is honestly, I think, the biggest one that I do see. And it's mainly because it's coming from the most heart-centered, good place, and really from a place of wanting to help, but not realizing that you're potentially hurting.
Yeah, no, that's, I love you bringing that up because that's something that I still catch myself doing this, right? Like just client comes to you with a problem and it's automatically, hey, how can I fix this? What can I do? When, can you still hear me? You froze for a second. Are you good?
Oh, no, you're
Okay,
good.
cool.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you just go straight to, hey, I'm going to help you out. But like you said, ask questions, right? Ask them why they're feeling that way, or do they have potential solutions? And I always find that's much better than just being like, hey, you should do this. And I guess what is the rationale behind that of asking them those questions? Is it anything like, are they just like less likely to maybe follow through? Do they have that sense of, hey, they're in the decision-making process, or like, what is the rationale behind that?
Yeah, so a big part of that is that it is more autonomy supportive. And autonomy is a basic psychological need. And what I mean by that is you will feel more motivated to do something and stick with something if you feel like it's your own decision and it's something that's in your control and it's determined, is what they call it in the literature. This is based out of something called self-determination theory, actually. So when we are encouraging our clients to come up with their own solutions and think of the direction on their own, the sort of side effect is that they feel more empowered. They feel like, oh, I'm capable of doing this on my own, or my ideas are just as good as my coach's ideas. And then the idea too is that down the line, they will start to come up with solutions without necessarily having to go to you first. For instance, the clients that I still work with, they have not taken a new health and fitness coaching client one-on-one in, I think, 3 years at this point. But those that I still work with have been with me between 3 and 7 years, which is just like ridiculous at this point. But it is so easy to coach them, not just because for the sake that it's been 7 years and I know them so well, that's part of it, obviously, but So often, more often than not, they're coming to me saying, oh, I have this idea, or I have this struggle, or I have this goal, this thing I want to try. And here's exactly how I want to do it. And here's how I'm going to get around any potential barriers. Like they're already trained to almost coach themselves in a way. And that is a really beautiful place to be in if you're a coach. And so many coaches are concerned when they hear, oh, ask more questions and have more conversations with your clients. And they're like, I have a roster of 50 to 60 clients. How am I going to spend more time on them, Kasey? This doesn't make any sense. Yeah, you might have to put a little more time in on the front end, but on the back end, now you're dealing with, I don't know, 90% less of your clients struggling with self-sabotage and not sticking to the plan and lacking motivation, not checking in, ghosting you. That stuff is more often than not eliminated because you're doing some of this work on the front end. So that's the idea behind asking more questions, spending more time there instead of them just immediately receiving the how-to.
Sorry, my dog in the background wanted to make some noise. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like you said, the autonomy, they're able to, like you said, self-determination. And then like in the long run, it's, hey, up front, you're probably putting in more work with that client, but long term, it's they're going to be able to do these things on their own and you're giving them that autonomy. Is there like anything else that like coaches overlook or anything like this? Obviously, communication is a big one. Is there anything else that, yeah, they overlook here in this process?
Yeah, there's a
You're
lot
like,
of things. There's definitely a lot of things. Another one that comes to mind immediately that I see often is just a hyper focus on weaknesses. And again, not necessarily in a bad way, because again, we're just trying to help. So you see a client who's struggling with something, or they're not very good at a certain thing, or they keep coming back to me being like, I don't think I can do this, or I'm not like strong enough to do this, or what. We always want to help them correct the weakness and get better at the thing that is difficult for them. And to some degree, yes, focus on the things that you're not so good at, even if it's uncomfortable, and work to get better. And when you do, that's going to feel fantastic and probably help you with your mindset too. But we spend far too much time focusing on what's wrong, what needs to be improved, what needs to be better, then let's uncover the things that are going really well. And let's uncover the strengths that you already have. And let's talk about that you already have a knack for and leverage those in the coaching relationship. It really should be like 80% focusing on strengths, 20% like adjusting weaknesses and things that are going wrong. But it's so easy for us to see the negative and see the things that need fixing and need to be updated and upgraded and developed versus let's uncover what you're already doing. That's just not what we naturally do. As humans, we actually have a negativity bias. So our focus is on the negative already. As coaches, really what you should be doing is helping your clients uncover those strengths. We also, as humans, have something that we lean towards called the taking strengths for granted. In fact, we're not very good at recognizing our own strengths, our own wins, that sort of thing. So as a coach, really what one of your jobs is to help your clients recognize those strengths and use those strengths and find those strengths, something that you can't necessarily do so well on your own. That's a beautiful role that the coach gets to play. So when we do that, again, it's a lot more of like competence building, which is another basic psychological need, which also helps with motivation and sticking with things. So we want to feel autonomy. We want to feel competence. And we also want to feel we belong. That's the third one. So those are the three basic psychological needs. So from this perspective, if we can help our clients understand what they're capable of doing, that's going to bring up their competence. It's going to make them feel like they're more likely to be successful. It's going to help them cultivate a growth mindset. It's going to help them stick to the plan. So that's a reasoning behind some of that too.
yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, right? Again, it's client comes to you and you want to help them. And then it's, hey, you're just focusing on what can we improve? And you're not really thinking about their strengths and what they're already good at. And that's, again, I see that all the time, right? Where clients will typically just talk about their weaknesses and really do have to bring them to some of the positives that they're just potentially overlooking. Is this, so I guess two follow-ups on this. One, can you overdo this, go so far on the strength side, or do you think that's never really, I know you said 80-20, but can you potentially overdo that where it's just, hey, oh, everything's like kind of perfect type situation? And then do you see like a gender difference here with this? Do you find that maybe this is women specifically maybe fall on one end or men, or is it pretty much just universal like across the board there?
Yeah. And I think, of course, you can go too far on the just general praise and being a cheerleader. Like, I don't want anyone listening to this being a cheerleader coach and
Right.
telling their clients that they're doing everything right and they're the best and they're perfect all of the time, because that's also just not true. And your clients will see right through you if you. And I think there's a difference between helping clients uncover what they're already good at, what they can leverage to the best of their ability that maybe they didn't recognize before, and pointing out when things are progressing, when maybe they're not recognizing it. There's a difference between doing that and also just like singing their praises and being this like cheerleader, right? So I do think you can be an over aggressive cheerleader. And I have seen that that's like the toxic positivity type of stuff, right? You're just like glossing over everything and sweeping things under the rug and, oh, let's just try again next week. It's no problem, like no big deal, when that's really not going to help them either. And focusing on, okay, what didn't go so well so we can try to change that for next time. Like those are still conversations you should be having, but within those conversations you can say, but a month ago, you had this really good week where this didn't happen, even under the same circumstances. Let's talk about what you did that week, and maybe we can use that in the future. So you can see where you can still tie those things in while maintaining a sense of like realism. When it comes to men and women in the coaching space, it's hard. I don't want to give any hard and fast rules here. I would
Absolutely.
say, honestly, in the health mindset coaching certification, we've had over 600 students go through the program at this point. So they're all coaches or health and fitness professionals, I should say. And probably, if I had to guess, 75 to 80% of those coaches are women. So that's also where I'm spending the majority of my time is with female coaches. But with that said, I will say the only time, not only times, there's been a couple times, but most of the times I come across comments on Instagram posts or Instagram posts in general, or oh my God, threads is so off that app, to be honest. Any comments that are flying in the face of what we know about behavior change, mindset, psychology for client motivation or sticking to the plan, adherence, that sort of thing, is from a male coach. Again, this is just observational. I do think men can often fall into the place of just suck it up and do it.
Yeah.
Discipline or motivation, that sort of like mentality, more often than women. That said, there are plenty of women that are doing it too, but that's just, again, observational. That's what I would see. I would love to see more men in my program. I think every single cohort we actually do end up with, oh, here's 2 more than we had last time. Here's a few more than we had last time, which has been great because I really do think that a lot of male coaches would benefit from this. But mindset is just like the airy fairy woo stuff, which is totally fair because that's what most of the industry is presenting it as. But if we can really showcase that this is, no guys, this is science, let me show you. And obviously also I'm a woman, so I tend to attract that population too. I think my Instagram audience is like 85% women, just like as it stands. But yeah, hopefully that somewhat answers.
Yeah, no. And I appreciate the caveat there too, where it's like, hey, I mostly work with women. So that's your frame of mind where you're coming from as well. But you obviously see trends as well too. And I would tend to agree with you in terms of that's basically what I see too. It's like, hey, just that's kind of the mindset. Suck it up. Hey, mindset, like you said, is this woo type thing there with that. And then I guess last thing on this individualization, I'm assuming too that obviously our role as a coach is obviously to individualize things. I'm assuming too that like some of this stuff is individualizing it to the person, right? Learning the person and then the client in terms of what they do well with and what they don't do well with as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. All of it is. There's never, just like with nutrition or strength training, obviously we know to some degree to produce hypertrophy, we want to look at 12 to 20 sets per muscle group per week. We have that, but even within that, there are individual differences. There are people who can produce a ton of new strength and muscle and build more muscle quicker at like the 12 rep goal, not 12 rep goal, 12 set goal, whereas someone else may need 20 or more to achieve the same results. We always, although just like with any type of research, we're looking at the data as the aggregate. These are averages. So the same thing applies here. Different strategies are going to work different for different people, whether we're talking about self-control, habit formation, growth mindset cultivation. Some things are going to land for some people, and that's based on their life experiences, their personality, what's worked for them in the past, like how open they are to certain things, whereas other people need something entirely different. And luckily, there's a lot of different ways to go about this mindset coaching stuff from an evidence-based perspective. So it is just finding like what's going to land well for your clients. Actually, in level 2 of the certification, it's like our advanced methods opportunity. We spend a lot more time like diagnosing behavior, like what the behavior change blueprint really needs to look like for your client. So level 1 is let's do a catch-all of pretty much everything, surface level everything, get you started. And then in level 2, it's okay, now let's really talk about how you would diagnose a quote unquote behavior change problem in someone, and now learn how to pick and choose which strategy from level 1 is going to be best for the person. So we actually do a lot of that in our second level.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, first one's you're getting a ton of information, but then level two just takes it to that next step and really more advanced type stuff there with that.
Hmm.
Yeah, cool. Been talking about this from the coach's lens. I also want to think about it from the client's lens as well too here. So you had a post and it was basically you have a pyramid, right? And at the bottom of the pyramid, it's mindset, behavior, those are mindfulness, like and values. Like these are all things that are super important. So like for you, could you maybe just and maybe you've explained it a little bit, but what does this mean? And then I want to dive into what do you feel like most people like get wrong or where they're lacking there in that kind of base pyramid?
I think really the main thing here is when people say, I want to change my body composition, I want to live a healthier lifestyle, the first thing they think about is food and exercise, which is totally fair. It's something that obviously needs to be included. But I think it's one of those things where it's necessary but not sufficient. And instead of overlooking a lot of the really big foundational components of, again, mindfulness, values, mindset. And I think the next level on the pyramid too was just like your daily movement too, things like that. Pay attention to that. How many people are sitting for 10 hours a day and then they get their 1 hour workout in and they're like, I don't understand what's going on here. But that 1 hour workout is not going to negate the fact that you just sat for 10 hours. So things like that are very important too. But yeah, when it comes to like mindset, at the end of the day, is the lens that you take to see the entire world through. It's how you assign meaning to things, it's how you understand things. So, no matter the nutrition or exercise program that you start, if your mindset is in more of a fixed place, you're not really sure that you're going to be successful. You're not really sure this program is going to work for you. You're not really sure that you can stick to it. And you have this sort of fixed mindset instead of whereas a growth mindset would be like, oh, if I put in the right effort and strategies and I get the right resources, like I'm surely going to be successful. The fixed mindset side of the spectrum, you're going to have a really hard time being successful. I would go so far to say is like you won't be. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is how powerful your belief system and your mindset really is. And this is not me just speaking for woo land. It is where it is, there's true evidence and research to support everything that I'm saying. So that comes into play. I think mindfulness is another really big one, just bringing yourself back to the present moment and enjoying and paying attention to the process, because ultimately your entire life is. So if you're not mindful and being in the moment with the things that you are doing now, and that's something you're just constantly trying to race to the end, and that's all you care about, you're going to have a really unenjoyed time in the process. And what we know about motivation is that the more you really enjoy it, like a place of intrinsic motivation, the more likely you are to be successful, the more likely you are to stick with things long term. So you can see how mindfulness plays a role in your motivation as well. And then ultimately, values was the third thing that I had on the base of that pyramid, and what you value will direct a lot of your behaviors, right? So a lot of people have this belief that they want to lose weight, be healthier, feel better, but their values are misaligned from the behaviors and activities that are required to achieve those outcomes. So it does require a little bit of like a zooming out and really thinking like, okay, what do I value? And a lot of times you have to just like reconnect your values to those outcomes and to those behaviors and activities for that goal, health and fitness goal that you have. So you may value feeling good on a day-to-day basis. You may value your children. You may value success, but you're not necessarily currently seeing going to the gym and eating well as being connected to those values. Some people may actually don't even realize it again, but their values are disconnected. So they value the lives of their children. So they're like, why would I go to the gym after work? I need to get home to my kids. Why would I take the time to prep like this healthy meal and do all of that when I can just go through the drive-through and then get home as soon as possible? So that is disconnected. But the reality is, I think we spend more time with it. Taking care of yourself is going to open up, fill your cups, pour into others type of thing. Setting a good example for your children if you do value their own health and their lives and their futures, and maybe involving them in the healthy cooking process so it can be more of a family activity and you can build that connection over something that is a healthy behavior. So spending some time there and like really thinking about what do you value in your life and how do you currently attach or detach that from these health and fitness outcomes is something you could spend more time on for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't really think of it from that standpoint. The values are super important. I know, again, to go back to the mindset side of things, you mentioned fixed and growth mindset there. Is that kind of like the main thing there that you focus on with the mindset, or can that go a little bit deeper and there's like other kind of mindset things that you'll like commonly see? Again, with kind of the thought of, hey, someone's just trying to improve body comp, health, things like that.
Yeah, like I said, how the research really talks about mindset, and this is the stance that I take, is again that lens that you take to see the world through. So that could look like different things. Where I spent the majority of my time in the lab, publishing studies, and also what I do inside the certification and with clients is focusing more on the growth versus fixed mindset, like next step down from mindset more. So breaking that into growth versus fixed, we're really just looking at, do you actually believe that you can change, that you can develop, that you can improve in a certain area? Common misconception about growth versus fixed mindset is that you have a growth mindset or you have a fixed mindset about everything. And that's not the case. You can truly, and we again see this in studies, you can truly have a growth mindset about one thing, say your career path, your ability to progress, climb the ladder, whatever, and really that you can do that, but then have a fixed mindset when it comes to your weight loss goals and really not see yourself as someone who can lose weight and keep it off. Yes, I think this is just like speculation. Having a growth mindset in one area can help you develop one in another area and just believe in yourself in general. But we really do see that mindset is domain specific, is what they say. So that is the perspective that I take to something I see a lot of times. I think it works really well, especially health and fitness space, because you hear people talking about all or nothing thinking or victim mentality or what have you. And at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff just falls under the umbrella of having a fixed mindset. Like you're all or nothing thinking because you think that there's no other way to do things. And that is having a fixed mindset. You have a victim mentality and you think everything happens to you and it's everyone else's fault or it's circumstances fault because you don't actually see it to be successful and to improve and to do these things. So it's a lot easier to just blame it on external factors at that point. So yeah, I use that lens a lot, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the stuff that we deal with.
Yeah, no, that really does make a lot of sense. That's the umbrella that you said you're coming from, right? Where it's, hey, any of these other kind of like subcategories, like you said, all or nothing thinking, victim mentality, like it all is a subset of your fixed mindset there with that. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And also, I was looking at some of your content, and I like that we tend to think that we either have the growth mindset or we don't, right? But it's also like you said, domain specific as well too. And you may have it in one area, and you may not in the other area. But like you said, there it can also bring, if you develop that growth mindset in one area, it may bring some confidence to do it in other areas as well too. But I'm sure I have blind spots too with that, where I generally think I have a growth mindset, but I'm sure there's certain things where I'm like, I actually am a little bit more fixed on that end. What are some things that like somebody could do to shift from more of a fixed mindset to more of a growth mindset? Are there any like strategies, anything like that? Or yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing and most important thing and the most unsexy thing is to just become more aware of where your fixed mindset shows up. So like what you just said was a really good example of, I'm sure I have blind spots, but I don't really maybe know where those are. And that's the case for most people. And fixed mindset can be like a silent goal pursuit killer because you don't realize it is what's holding you back. So the first thing you have to do, you can't improve what you don't know needs improving. You really need to know where the stuff is showing up in the first place. Start doing that to go on this fixed mindset scavenger hunt is to really start to pay attention to your thoughts and how you're speaking about things to someone else. So again, I would focus on one domain at a time. So if we're talking about health and fitness goals, how you're talking about your progress to your coach, to other people in your life, thinking about it to yourself, and what words you're using. So something you can look for is words like always, never, or I'm not the type of person. So if you're saying like, oh, I'm just not the type of person to track macros, or I don't know, I've never really been an exerciser, things like that. Like those are such strong fixed mindedness. Or I've never been able to lose weight and keep it off, or I always fall off the wagon after at least like 4 weeks or so. If you're saying those things or thinking those those are the things that are holding you back from seeing more success more than anything. So really paying attention to your language, paying attention to how you respond to setbacks. If you're someone who has a setback and you have a weekend that you go off track, or maybe it's a week or whatever, how do you respond to those things? Someone with a growth mindset is going to see that as, okay, it happened. Let's learn from it. What information can I gather from that situation? And now, like, we pick back up and keep going. And someone with a fixed mindset is going to think, okay, that was a perfect example of why I'm not capable of doing this. Like, I knew it all along. I can't stay consistent. This is always my problem, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously I'm presenting two sides of the spectrum here, but you can really pay attention and see to which side you tend to lean to. Setbacks is a big one. Success of other people is another big one. So if you see someone else being successful in their weight loss goal, whatever health and fitness goal it is that you have, how do you respond to the success of someone else being successful? And someone with a fixed mindset will often see someone else's success in that area as not necessarily inspiration and more or less, oh, they must have something that I don't have. They have some sort of trait or they got lucky. It's something that I don't have and I certainly cannot get. And that's usually where their thought process goes, where someone with a growth mindset would see that person and go, oh my God, this is so cool because now I'm aware of what's capable and there's no reason I can't do that too. Maybe I should reach out to that person. Maybe they have certain resources for me and get really excited versus writing off someone else's success as something that you couldn't possibly obtain for yourself. So those are a couple big ones that I see frequently. There's a lot of different ways a fixed mindset could like sneakily show up, but those are a few ways that you can really start to pay attention.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's awesome. One thing that I commonly see, and I always try to like bring this up to clients when we talk about this type of stuff is, and I don't know if this is normal and maybe something, and I'm sure this is all part of change and everything, but maybe somebody has a sort of fixed mindset or they have something that they struggle with and like they get better at it. And then they think that like it's in the past, right? And it's, oh, I'm good to go. But I'm sure some of these things like you'll see creep back up, and I'm sure it's not this linear kind of growth process of like, all right, now you're officially in the growth mindset. I'm sure some of these things pop back up. And again, it's just like the levels of how bad they are as you move forward and whatnot.
Yeah, it's definitely not a linear process, and you're never going to be like 100% growth minded, honestly, in any area. Like, some doubt is going to creep back in, some disbelief in your ability to be successful or reach that next level or reach the 10th level that you're like, there's no way that I could potentially be there. So it's a constant thing that you do need to work on, and you will see yourself improving over time. And that should also help you keep up that momentum. And you'll see yourself starting to think in more of a growth mindset oriented way more automatically, whereas before maybe it was more fixed oriented. So really paying attention to when you do make those shifts and start thinking differently and spend some time there too, and give yourself a pat on the back when you do go that direction can really help continue that momentum. But also understanding that this stuff is work. Like, you have these pathways in your brain that have likely been there for years and years, if not decades for some people. It's not going to shift and you're not going to start thinking differently 100% of the time as soon as you start paying attention to where your growth mindset is, right? Like, you really will have to take some time and put some effort into forcing yourself to think differently about something, even if it feels unnatural, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if you don't actually totally believe it for the first few times. But eventually put enough reps in. There is something called neuroplasticity where we are literally changing the connections in our brain. It is possible to change your brain connections, and it is possible to start thinking differently and therefore doing differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure obviously the earlier you can do that, the better, but you're always there. We're always able to change. We're always able to grow. And that's super important. I know you mentioned there's some other kind of misconceptions around the growth mindset. I know you mentioned one, again, that being, hey, just because your growth mindset in one domain doesn't mean you're that way in all. Is there any other kind of misconceptions or anything people get wrong with the growth mindset?
Yeah, I think a big one, another big one, there's a handful, but another big one that I see that comes to mind a lot is that having a growth mindset is simply about just trying harder. That if you try harder, you will see success. When that's really just a really strong fallacy in a way, because we also don't want to get into this position of, so long as I try hard, that I certainly will be successful. I think we've all had situations where we've tried really hard at something, but didn't necessarily get the outcome that we were looking for. So that's a strong misconception too, because there's so much other stuff that goes into having a growth mindset. And often it's more about not necessarily just it's just white knuckling through it and putting in all of the time and the energy and the effort, but also being strategic and finding resources and being willing to ask for help. And if things do go awry and you put all this time and energy in, that as data and information to continue to move forward and not just assume, okay, well, if that didn't work, then it's not for me. That's actually more of a fixed mindset. So I think that's like the other big one that I see, that it's just try harder. That means you have a growth mindset. That's no, there's a lot more to it. And if you do try harder and fail, that's where your growth mindset really shines the most, rather than just the try harder piece.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, just keep trying harder. That's a growth mindset. But again, yeah, it's definitely deeper than that. Cool, Kasey. A ton of great stuff there with that. I think again, that's super helpful for people to really be able to utilize this stuff with their training and nutrition, because again, it is something that again is overlooked, and people really just try to look at I guess I would call those like the tactical stuff, right? The calories and macros and the training and this stuff. Again, working with clients like and when they come to me, this is the stuff that like again is overlooked, and again too many people don't focus on this, so I think this is super helpful for people. I'm curious, I know you did some research in the past. Are you still doing any research now at this point? And if okay, so you said no. What were some papers that you were on? Was there any in particular that you thought were like that you would recommend people go check out, or like any that you really enjoyed, or anything like that?
Yeah, and so I'm no longer actively doing research. Definitely left the ivory tower and have moved into full-time entrepreneurship at this point. But yeah, honestly, I'm trying to think. I have, I think, four published research articles, maybe five. Go if you go to Google Scholar and literally put in my name and mindsets after that, and that's where you'll be able to find the majority of it. I do think probably what would be most interesting to people is there's a paper where I examined how your mindset about fitness affects how often you exercise. And something that I found that there were two mediators in that relationship, which essentially means that having a growth mindset about your fitness level impacts something like your identity about being an exerciser. So your growth mindset leads you to feel like you identify more with being an exerciser, and also gives you more value in exercise. So remember, we talked about value before too. So what we see when we zoom out is that growth mindset leads to more exercise frequency. That's the relationship we see when we zoom out. But then when we zoom in, we see that the reason this is happening is because your mindset impacts your identity and your values. And those things in turn lead to more frequent exercise. So it's a cool study that explained the mechanism behind why mindset maybe makes an impact in our exercise activity. And there's obviously likely other variables at play here too. But I think the takeaway here is that it's not usually just a direct mindset to outcome. Like your mindset is impacting a whole host of other things that are quote unquote like proven, things that we see in the research to help with increasing exercise frequency, which is something like identity and value. So that was one paper, and I couldn't for the life of me tell you the exact name of the paper because they're all just like scientific jargon at this point. But again, Orvidas Mindsets, Google Scholar, you'll be able to find a bunch of stuff there.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And yeah, that's awesome there with that. Yeah. And I understand that you can't name the exact title because like you said, it is, like you said, scientific jargon there with that. I do have, what I'll typically do sometimes on these episodes is at the beginning, I'll talk about the guest training and nutrition. So I think people probably listen to this and very interested in what you have to say about mindset, psychology and all that. But like, what do you do for your training and nutrition? I'm curious to see how you apply this to yourself. So what does that kind of look like? And I'm sure I'll have some questions off of this.
Yeah, fun question. So, yeah, I've been on my own health and fitness journey since probably like 2011, maybe. Very long time, and I did all of the things wrong at the beginning, as as anyone did. I've actually been working. I've worked with a handful of coaches over the years, and have learned a lot, both good and bad, from those coaches. But I say most recently, my coach is she's actually become one of my best friends too, which is really cool. But I've been working with her for 7 years. At
Wow.
this point, she hasn't really done much for my nutrition, but still writes my training programs. It's one of those things where I think once you get to a more advanced level with your own health and fitness, it's less about learning. And I'm not really looking for her to help me with a lot of these like more health mindset coaching certification type of things, right? Like mindset related things. Because I'm good. Like I'm very consistent. My health and fitness routine, it is very much a part of like my identity and who I am as a person and what I need to do in order to feel good on a day-to-day basis. But for me, it's more about just, I'm not trying to write my
Yeah.
own program anymore. I don't want to do that. I would just rather have someone else do it who really knows me well, has been working with me for a long time. It's nice to have the accountability if I do have all right, let's drop a few pounds type of thing. Let's like tighten up a little bit, or or I really want to build some muscle. Like I need some help, like keeping me accountable to making it to the gym and pushing myself and that sort of thing. I think accountability is something that I was going to say is underrated, but I think most people do realize how important accountability is. I would at least hope so, because it is like, even I think that would be the one thing that even advanced coaches still need and would really appreciate is a level of accountability. That's why we do things like book club or talk to a friend. Hey, I want to try to get 10,000 steps a day. Will you like do it with me type of thing? We're always seeking that accountability and that partnership. And that's actually funny because this brings us full circle to the psychological needs, because one of those three psychological needs is belongingness and relatedness. And I think a lot of times accountability rather is actually a vehicle for belonging and relating to someone else and connecting and building a relationship too. Yeah, right now I'm actually playing around a unique style dieting approach and doing a more aggressive deficit for 2-week periods at a time, and then going back to maintenance for 1 or 2 weeks. You've probably seen this used before. It's more of a study type of approach. It's been really interesting. And I think it's helpful actually from a psychological perspective, because it's pretty easy to push hard for a couple weeks when you know that you get to eat more pretty soon. And also being able to time it around when I'm traveling and things like that too. So it's been fun. I've been doing that since the beginning of March and it's been going well. So that's like what's currently on my radar.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, no. So basically it sounds like you're doing, so is this, you'll just do this for like short period of time? Like you'll do 2 weeks, again, you'll switch back and forth. Is this for like extended periods of time, or you just like, hey, for a couple months, I'm going to be doing that? Is that just like what you're currently doing? Or is that like what you do for like extended periods of
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, it's what I'm playing around with right now.
Yeah.
Honestly, I had not even tracked macros for probably a year and a half prior to doing this again. And it was more or less just call it intuitive eating, just like living my life with the knowledge that I have after years and years and years of doing this. But I was itching for a challenge and was wanting to try something and get myself back into the swing of things. I broke my wrist back in October, which kept me on the couch a lot more and not getting to do as much as I wanted to. So I was like, I'm ready to really get back and follow something that sounds fun to me. Again, intrinsic motivation. You're more likely to stick to something if it's fun for you. So yeah, just something I'm experimenting with. Like I said, I started in March. I'll probably run it through the end of the summer and see what I can accomplish with that. I have a photo shoot around that time too. So
Awesome.
it's like a fun milestone to work towards. But yeah, that's what we're doing over here.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I know in the research, when it comes to, like you said, the Matador type studies, the kind of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, is the psychological benefit can be really nice to be able to do that. And do you think that just comes from just being like, just pushing it for a little bit and then maybe backing off a little bit? You think that's the big thing that around that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think just like having that sort of constant light at the end of the tunnel, rather than if you are isocaloric and just bringing your calories down slowly, adding cardio in as you plateau, it just feels like that light is so far away. Like it's the end of the diet is the light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas with this approach, it feels, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to run towards that. And it's okay. Now we go back in another tunnel. And oh, there it is again. Shortens that feeling of it's so far away and I have so much time before I get there type of thing. So yeah, I think that's probably the main benefit. I know that there's some evidence in the research that it can be helpful for like muscle mass preservation and maybe metabolic rate, that sort of thing too. So it's hey, if there's a little bit of benefit there as well. But I think in general, like most people can do almost anything for 2 weeks. That's really where my perspective is, and feeling okay, we're going to this 6-month long like diet type situation feels hard and like how am I going to get through it? But if I said, hey, you just need to drop your calories pretty low for 2 weeks, people are like, 2 weeks, of course I can do that. So I think there's probably a mindset component to it as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's awesome. I also just thought about some topics that you and I could go over in the future here for another episode. I'll have to bring those up to you when we hop off air. But real quick, before I let you go, again, appreciate your time today. A ton of great information here. It's nice to go a little bit different than just like macros, training and stuff. So this was awesome. Where can the audience find you? And then lastly, is there like maybe 1 or 2 books that you would recommend from like a mindset perspective?
Okay,
Outside of your coaching course, of course.
Yeah, of course. I just immediately plug all of my own content. Yeah, about that Google Scholar. I think the one book I definitely recommend, and it was also how I started getting into mindset science and really understanding what it was, is called Mindset. It's by Dr. Carol Dweck. I like to say she's like my academic grandmother in a way, because my advisor has worked with her a lot. So Carol Dweck's work very much has informed all of my work and everything that I do today. And it is a New York Times bestseller. It's not a super dry textbooky type of book. So I really like that one as far as getting into some of this understanding of things. Anything from Chip and Dan Heath is really great as far as behavior change goes. So you can look into those authors and those books as well. And as far as where to find me, social media, I mainly hang out on Instagram. I'm making my way into the land of podcasts even more pretty soon here. So, fun fact, this is actually the first place I'm publicly saying that I will have a podcast releasing soon. I'm a guest on a podcast 3 to 4 times a month. So you can find me if you type in my name into podcast, like I'm everywhere already, but this will be my own show, which I'm very excited about. And yeah, Instagram, I'm Coach Kasey Joe. You can find me there. And there's links out to every other program, workshop, free content, free resource type of thing there. And you can always shoot me a DM too if you're looking for something specific.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Congrats on the podcast. That'll be awesome. I'm sure you'll have a ton of great, I don't know, depending on your format, it may be solo. I'm not sure on what you're planning on doing there, but either way, I'm sure it will be awesome. So looking forward to that. Again, Kasey, really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll have to have you come back on again in the future. So talk to you soon and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come back.